Hey everyone, and welcome to part 8 of our top 50 movies of the 2010s. Make sure you check out the previous 7 parts, but this episode is going to feature numbers 15 through 11, so without further ado, here is number 15.
Number 15, Moneyball. Brad Pitt. It's a baseball movie. I understand people don't like it. I read this book and was infatuated with it. Found out they were making a movie starring Brad Pitt, and I wondered how they were going to do it because it's very stat heavy in how Billy Beane took the Oakland A's using advanced stats and turned them into a World Series contender. And reading that book and seeing all these raw numbers and certain things that have happened, how does that translate to the screen? And I think Bennett Miller really pulled it off, and it's got a lot of heart in there, despite getting heavy into what makes these baseball players tick. And early Chris Pratt performance, he plays he's a catcher that they convert to first base because of his skills that fits the A's. And Jonah Hill playing Brad Pitt's assistant. They have good chemistry. I think that's just Jonah Hill though at this point. He's a very very talented actor, and just kind of almost feeling Brad Pitt playing himself, which you don't see too much. Like he's just playing a guy. There's nothing much more to him. He's just a guy that's trying to do good and trying to be more in his family's life, and this job taking him away. But yeah, it's a movie it's hard to describe my love for. Besides that, I really like baseball. So and Moneyball just does everything right.
My 15 is Gravity. This is a thrilling movie. For the record, one of the only movies I've seen in the cinema in 3D that I do not regret seeing in 3D. Wasn't intentional either. I got to it kind of late in its showings, and it was the only thing they had left. So I went, sure, why not? I want to see it, and did not regret it. Looks fantastic in 3D, which is surprising. But yeah, I mean, it's Gravity. You get movie. She's stranded in space on her own, and has to get back to Earth, and that's the movie. It's pretty tight. It's fantastically directed. It's thrilling. It's exciting. The wanna near the opening is gorgeous. The way it treats space, it treats it very seriously and realistically. Yet it's very exciting and very tense. Is the movie? Even though it's Ed Score is a very simple thing that's happened. It's got a wonderful score from I think Stephen Price. It's a very pretty unique score. There's not a lot of things like it, and it does some wonderful things. And it's just a gorgeously shot movie. The way it looks, the way it's directed, yeah, comes together fantastically.
It's hard not to pop when the operatic singing starts kicking in towards the end of the score.
Yeah,
I think this is my highest comic book movie on the list, and that would be Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh, yes.
This was such a, it was kind of like a weird unknown entity when you heard about it coming out. It's like, oh, Sony's making an animated Spider-Man movie, and like I do love animation, but I'm not a big fan of CG. And then it seems weird, like kind of an offshoot or afterthought like to the other movies, but they just did such a good job with it, and it feels so comic booky. I love bringing in all like the other universes, which is like a very Marvel thing, Spider-Man thing, and it's just has like a lot of heart and humor. And I think the big thing for me is even though I don't like CGI, they managed to come like with a really cool style for it, where it actually feels like it has character and personality, versus like whatever, just some bland like DreamWorks thing, or even Pixar. Like I like a lot of Pixar movies, but I don't think they necessarily have like a cool aesthetic to them usually.
A lot of them look
Like,
the same. Like they have the same kind of curved looking sort of people and stuff in them, yeah.
Which it's serviceable, it's fine, but it doesn't really stand out, where this like like all the vibrant colors and designs and stuff really stood out. And it is like really funny, but also had like some emotional parts. And I was just surprised at how much I liked it. And maybe it helps that all that kind of makes it stand out from whatever umpteenth Marvel movie we had, which is like, all right, whatever, Ant-Man and the Wasp is fine, but we've kind of its old hat at this point. Like this kind of felt new and fresh, which was cool.
My number 15 is the Avengers. I know you've brought it up already, but like it really was special when we saw it in the theaters. It was one of those things where just like, oh, this changes movies forever. And because I didn't think we can have an ensemble like that where everybody has their own leading role in a film already and be able to, I don't know, share the screen so well in a movie format. And I was proven wrong. That Josh Whedon guy's really good.
You said it right. You said it right the first time. Yeah, this was a weird experience for me when it came out because, like, obviously, I mean, I like some of the movies before that, but some of them were kind of weak as well. And but obviously, I was
even the weak ones I really like. Like, I still enjoy them. There's like the weak Marvel films are better than a lot of other like okay films in the theater.
For the most part, first Avenger brought the crap out of me, but that's
oh, I like it.
That's for another debate.
It's a war movie. I like it.
But like Joss Whedon, I was a huge fan of, and it'd been a couple of years since he'd done anything because he was working on Avengers, and it was super exciting. And bizarrely, we got Cabin in the Woods like 2 months before Avengers came out, so I got this kind of like double dose of Whedon, like back to back. But like, and you can hear his voice in that movie. The jokes in that movie are very Whedon. And one of the things that I think he does in that that's so good is that he keeps it very simple. Like, it's such a simple story about them teaming up and finally having to come together to fight this enemy. And it's that simplicity that I think lends itself to just, okay, keep the premise simple and we can just really bask in the first encounter between, Thor and Hulk, or the first encounter between Cap and Iron Man, or the first encounter between Iron Man and Thor. And all of these moments, everyone that I just mentioned, you thought of that scene in your head because they're all memorable. They're all memorable moments.
Mm-hmm. I think the 2010s, like, I don't know how long the Marvel franchise is going to go, but I think this decade will be remembered for these films.
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a great time at the theater, and I just was so impressed at the fact that they made it.
My number 15 is actually like one of my biggest surprises of the decade by far. I went into this expecting nothing and came out in love with this movie to the point where I would say it's my second favorite film from this director, and that is Martin Scorsese's Hugo. I love Hugo. Hugo is a heartfelt celebration of the dawn of cinema, and when I went in to see it, I didn't even know that's what it was. Like, I went in and it was, oh, it's this kid and he finds things and he's like hiding in a train station and it becomes this movie about the dawn of cinema and a love of that early cinema. And not only that, but the preservation of it and the preservation of like making sure that we appreciate where this began. And I love it. I like this more than Goodfellas. I like this more than
which is the one that you rate above it?
Taxi Driver. I do love Taxi Driver. Very polar opposite movie as well. Very different films. But I like this more than Wolf of Wall Street, and I like those movies. Whereas I could say more than Departed, but I don't like The Departed at all, so that's not really saying anything. But
a lot of people do.
A lot of people do. Shutter Island shite as well. While I'm on the subjects of bad Scorsese movies, like Scorsese for me is a good director who's very hit and miss. Like, there's some movies of his that I really like and appreciate, and then there's some that I don't like at all. But the two that I love are Taxi Driver and Hugo, and it's such a weird pair, but Hugo is full of love and life, and it's this appreciation of cinema. You can tell this is Scorsese talking about what he loves, and it's funny because recently we had him make these comments about Marvel movies, and he came across a little bit as a old man yells at cloud. I do think he kind of had a point. He said it in a kind of condescending way, but you watch this movie and you realize that it doesn't come from a place of hate. It becomes from a place of love because he loves cinema and he loves this rich history that it has, and Hugo is that.
He really worded it badly and then just kept digging whenever anyone asked him about it more. But I don't. He doesn't hate the Marvel movies. He doesn't think they shouldn't exist. He's not saying that, right?
Yeah, I recommend, if you haven't seen Hugo, check out Hugo. Like, give it a try. I fell in love with it. I really did.
I haven't, because I'm often not a huge Scorsese fan. I kind of at the time just went and I always forget how much you love this movie. Every time you bring it up, it's a surprise, and then I go, oh yeah, that.
Number 14, Jake Gyllenhaal. So I think if I count these up, I have a lot of Jake Gyllenhaal and a lot of Ryan Gosling, which makes sense because they're my two favorite working actors. But this is a Jake Gyllenhaal movie where I've never seen him be more unsettling. And this is Nightcrawler. Very different type movie in that it focuses on this guy that almost like a Damien Chazelle movie. Once he gets his mind set on something, he's not gonna stop until he gets it. And it's this kind of odd guy that finds out about the world of being a Nightcrawler, which is, an accident happens overnight, or you're first on scene with a camera, you turn around and sell that to the news. But what happens when you stop recording the news and start trying to not make the news, but trying to manipulate it? And that's what happens. And Gyllenhaal is fantastic. Renee Russo has a smallish role. She's real well. It's her husband that directed. I forget his name.
Dan Gilroy.
Gilroy. And Bill Paxton, one of his last roles. And he's this real blustery Nightcrawler that's been doing it for a while. It's mainly based on Jake Gyllenhaal. I really enjoy this movie, and I feel like I shouldn't because it feels kind of grimy and dirty, but it's entirely too watchable, I think.
My number 14 is Drive. This is the movie that put Refn on the map, so to speak. I was already a fan before this. I'd seen a couple already, but I think this is the one that gave him some mainstream attention. And then when the next one came out, everyone was like, "What the hell? Where's Drive?" Because he really overcompensated to make it clear this is not just your standard Refn movie, even though it has all of the kind of trademark signatures of a Refn movie. Long shots, not a shitload of dialogue. The fantastic scores. It is in every definition of the word a Refn movie. But for some reason, it hit that mainstream appeal in a way that none of the others did. And I understand why, because it's a phenomenal movie. It's so good. The first time I watched this, I was ill. I had like the flu, and I was just delirious. And I was like, "What am I watching?" And I had to watch it again when I got better because I was like, I feel like I didn't really appreciate that. And then when I watched it again, I fell in love. So it wasn't the first time I saw it, even though, that was probably my fault. But I've seen it, I don't know, 5 or 6 times since then already, and I love it more each time.
So my number 14, that would be Us. So the second film from Jordan Peele. I know some people weren't as hot on it, but I really, really like it. I just think it's such a an interesting idea, and then just really, really amazing performances, great music. Peele just really seems to, just he's got it, man. Like Get Out was like great, but then this, like, it was just like, oh, okay, like that wasn't like a fluke or anything. I know some people are saying like, oh, here's your sophomore slump, but I thought this was absolutely phenomenal. And I've watched it like several times since it came out, and it still really holds up. And I just really, really like this movie. And
Baby, he's got it. Baby, he's got it. That's the wrong tune. I don't even know what I'm trying to do. Can I tell you?
Yeah, and I know some people have some problems like with the ending and some like what do you want to call it? Some issues with the mythology that they build, and I recognize that there are, that's not perfect. You definitely have some questions about it, but it doesn't take away from like the experience of the movie, which I think is just still so good. And I can't wait to see what he does next.
Number 14 is Edge of Tomorrow.
Phil?
Super fun science fiction with Tom Cruise. I love this movie. I think it is really, I love watching him go his journey from being a coward to becoming a hero, and this really inventive way of telling the story through the Groundhog Day method, which is fairly compared to, and it's a formula that works. I mean, it works in Happy Death Day also, and it's just a really intelligent way of making a video game movie, really. And yeah, I love it. I think it's so rewatchable, entertaining from beginning to end. Like all these movies that I have coming up are pretty highly rated, and I think this one's like a 10. I don't think there's a flaw in the film.
It was such a pleasant surprise, and I've said that a few times about a few of the entries you brought up. But here's the weird thing: is that
here's a flaw. The title is stupid.
Okay, sure.
Everything else is perfect.
most of the most of the movies that I've said that about, though, like there's a reason why a lot of my favorites typically tend to be pleasant surprises, is because the ones that are truly special are the ones that just came out of nowhere, and it's like, hey, this is amazing, and I had no expectations going in. In some cases, I had negative expectations going in.
I don't even like. I went and saw a lot of movies when I was in college, and just like every week I saw at least one, probably two, and I don't even remember this movie being advertised. Like I don't remember a trailer until like a couple weeks before the movie was released. It was almost like the studio was like trying to hide it. Like they didn't think it would make money or something, or I don't know.
And they tried to
so bizarre.
They tried to change the title when they released it on home video as well, which was really weird.
Because the poster they had was just live, die, repeat, Edge of Tomorrow.
Oh dear.
So, but both titles are dumb. That's the only thing.
My number 14 is Gravity, appearing not too long after you had this mentioned. This is one woman show, essentially, for the most part. Almost all visual effects stuff, and hardly any sets. I mean, obviously there's some space station stuff, but like, it's. I think what's great about this is, and something that I think a lot of movies overcompensate for, is simple is often better. And obviously this is difficult to do, and there's a lot of difficulties that happen throughout the story, but at its core it's very simple. It's just someone, stuck in space after disaster strikes, trying to survive and trying to find a way of getting back down to Earth. Like that is the movie. It's that simple. And it just treats it with such class. Alfonso Cuarón, who's a director who, bounces around doing different types of things, but he's a very, he's a craftsman. He's a very, auteur-style director, and this is almost just an action movie from someone like that, but it works so beautifully because of that. And people say you have to see this in 3D. I never did. I saw this multiple times in the theater in 2D and loved it every time, and I think it works that way. Perfectly.
Yeah, I think it's important to know. I have seen this, again and again since I saw that first time in 3D. And while I will say the 3D has something just an extra little bit special that I love more just because of that, it does still hold up. It's not like a make or break, ruin the experience.
I actually love the ending. I think the final beats, which play out very simply, and because she's on her own, there's very little dialogue. There's a couple of moments where she'll talk to herself or whatever, but the ending is included in this in the sense that it's just it's this quiet beauty.
That leads me to number 13, which might be one of the most matte picks of all time, and that is Pacific Rim.
Yeah,
Pacific Rim, big monsters, just knocking the hell out of each other with robots, kind of Power Rangers-esque in it. But yeah, a lot of fun. Guillermo del Toro, one of my favorite movies of his because it doesn't rely too much on the monsters, and he can just take time to tell a fun sci-fi story. Sequel's pretty good too, but this one has a little bit more of that flair that I like more. The other one feels just more like I don't want to say made, a DVD. You know what I mean? Made for DVD because it was in theaters, but it doesn't match up, I think, to the first one. Despite having some of the best moments in the franchise, right? Like,
I like Pacific Rim a lot. I actually like Pacific Rim 2 even more than Pacific Rim 1. I think it was scratching a Power Rangers itch that I didn't know I had when it came out. And I say that as someone who doesn't typically like Guillermo del Toro movies that much, but I happen to really like Pacific Rim.
I just realized I left a movie off when I said big monsters. Yeah, so I don't know if I'm going to take one off and to throw it in there, but if I do, that's going to throw off everything else.
Oh.
Man. Yep. So I'll just say, I left Kong Skull Island off my list by complete accident.
Like he definitely had Kong Skull Island in his top 15.
which is one of my top 50 movies. So if I'm allowed to do an A/B,
No.
I'll do that.
No
slash A/B.
No slashing.
No tie.
No ties. Ties are not allowed.
Crap.
So I'm going to reveal something right now, so I can select the reaction at the appropriate part. Matt forgot to put Kong Skull Island on his list.
I want the viewers to know. I did forget Kong Skull Island because I threw this list together real quick, and I said there's going to be mistakes. That's the most glaring.
13 is possibly the pinnacle of action movies, at least in the last decade, but maybe longer. Mad Max Fury Road. Yep. This is a 2-ish hour car chase, and it is fantastic. It's over the top. It's bombastic. It feels like you should at some point get bored of how over the top it is because it just keeps going. Yet you never do. It's always so enjoyable. It's fist pumpingly exciting. Yeah, it's such a good movie and gorgeous as well. Like the storm as well in particular always stands out as this visual spectacle. But you've got the dude on the truck with a guitar flamethrower. What do you want in an action film?
So who knows when this will come up, but this is a movie that we just talked about a little earlier, and that is The Lighthouse. And when I say we, I mean you and me when we just recorded our review for it.
Yes, which was today, yes.
But no, I mean, it's phenomenal. Again, this is another follow-up from a very prominent horror director, Robert Eggers, who blew me away with The Witch. Blew a lot of people away, but yeah, I think I was the biggest fan of it out of everyone in the world.
Well, it did have a goat in it, Tim. So I mean, yeah, it's right up your alley.
But no, I mean, I think this, is just as good. It's a different type of movie. It's on our review, we even kind of struggled exactly how to kind of sell it or talk about it or like say what it's about. I mean, essentially, it's two amazing actors stuck in a lighthouse. I mean, well, they play lighthouse workers, but the performances are from actors, as most movies are. But
it's a hard way to describe, but even by that standard, you're struggling, Tim. What's going?
But I mean, essentially, it's just two people stuck on a little island in a lighthouse, slowly going insane and being driven into madness. And when you watch it, you feel the madness like creep on you. It's I think like we said in our review, it's kind of like an experience. Like watching it is, it's not so much a story as like a feeling, like a thing that you go through with these people. And it's just, I just can't really get over just how haunting and beautiful it is. Just really phenomenal.
Number 13 is Prisoners.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, sly little Denis Villeneuve film from earlier on, sneaking in there.
I know. It's one that I totally ignored until more recently, and couldn't believe how, like, dark and just beautiful it was to look at. Like, the cinematography, I think it's Deakins. Is that his name? Roger Deakins?
Roger Deakins, yeah.
It's just so gorgeous, and it's horrifying. And it's about a dad who loses his daughter, and his and her friend both get abducted, and they think it's Paul Dano, who lives in like this trailer, or has been in this trailer on the street, and there's something kind of off about him. He's not quite all there. Like, he's an adult, but he's clearly has some mental challenges. And it's just a really great thriller about a dad who the worst thing in the world has happened to, and he's trying to get his kid back. And and Jake Gyllenhaal's in it. He plays like a detective who's on the case, who's trying to find her. And really a surprise film for me, because I don't know why. I think, well, it's probably because the trailer had Hugh Jackman and Terrence Howard.
Mm-hmm.
Not a big Terrence Howard fan. That's probably why. And it was like, oh, Hugh Jackman's trying to do drama. That's cool. I'll skip. Man, I was wrong. This movie is a 10. Like, it is really, really good.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but it is a really good movie.
It really stuck with me for a long time after I watched it.
And I like the ending a lot, actually.
Mhm.
I don't want to spoil it, but the very final moment I really like. Even though it was really predictable, like everything, but it's good that it's predictable because everything clicks because it makes sense. Like they've set it up properly that the final moment, like you know it's coming because it like makes sense. But no, it's really well done. And it was probably the first Villeneuve movie I saw. Because I saw it in theaters and I hadn't seen anything else from him before that. I don't think so. And I've not loved everything he's done. I was not a fan of Sicario.
Oh, I like Sicario. That didn't make my list, but I wanted to put it on there.
Yeah,
I have made a lot of hard cuts this list.
Yeah, I was not a fan of Sicario.
The tension in that movie is so good.
But he's done a lot of good stuff. He's clearly a director that's worth watching, and I am very much looking forward to his Dune, which.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we do a sci-fi podcast. We're definitely talking about Dune when it comes out.
Yep.
So that'll be fun. My number 13 is A Ghost Story. And this is a very sort of indie art house little
You don't even know how to describe it, do you?
yeah, I mean, this is a movie where, you know, this character dies, played by Casey Affleck, and the movie is him as a ghost watching, like, you know, his wife kind of mourn and then maybe move on eventually from the house. But when I say he's a ghost, like, he is a classic ghost with like just like a white sheet over himself. Like, that's all he is. And there's this wonderful quiet absurdity to it that just makes it feel so poignant. It is a movie that basks in the long takes and the silence. It's a movie that basks in just kind of the visual like simplicity of it. The movie's shot in 4:3. And it's this very just kind of somber tone, and it has this feeling of it almost at times kind of feels like not visually, because visually it's very different, but it almost at times feels like a kind of a Terrence Malick style of story, in the sense that it's more about just showing how, regardless of what happens, time keeps moving on, and how there's this kind of just unrelenting, never-ending nature to the universe. And it feels like a movie with all these big broad ideas, and it does that through just observing someone who's dead, observing the living, and that's all it is. And it just, things keep going on, things keep happening, and it's just kind of beautiful. And it's an experience. It's like, you know, it's not even a long movie, it's just a very simple experience of a film that is just so unique, so poignant. I always champion movies that, like, not only are unique and different, but work to the point where I'm sitting there kind of feeling things because I've never seen a movie presented to me in this way before. And it's such a simple idea, and like I think the reason why I champion like directors or auteurs, if you want to use a more pretentious word, of stuff like this, is because seeing the movie and you watch it and go, this works, this is great, and it's just this quirky idea that makes it all feel so layered and poignant. But then I imagine, like, you know, this director trying to explain to people, oh, I've got this idea for this tone and this the way that it'll feel when it's done. But to explain it to someone, it's a guy with a white sheet over his head just watching people. Like, it would sound ridiculous, and he has to believe so much in his own vision to pull it off, to know that this is what it's going to be like in the end when it's all put together and edited. This is how it's going to feel. This is what the tone's going to be, and to try and not even just convince other people, but just to believe it yourself and believe that you know what you're going to do to make it work. You know that you've got this end game in mind of how it's going to all come together, and that's true of all directors and putting movies together, because all of it is assembling all these things, and you have to believe in your head that you know how it's all going to work in the end. But with something like this, where, at least with other things, like, there's tried and true methods, there's like, you know, safety nets, and there's things you can go, okay, we're going to do something that's kind of like this movie, or it's kind of like that, and you put it together. This is something where this could have completely shit the bed and not worked. He had to believe completely in himself and what his idea was, and it paid off.
So number 12 is Cabin in the Woods. First horror movie I can remember seeing in theaters that made me rethink horror, because this can be something that's completely different and fun, and it doesn't have to be just, because at that time there was a lot of like of the torture porn kind of movies coming out, and I don't like that type of horror. I like the more tense and you know, fun like Friday the 13th style, you know, or if you're gonna do type of horror like Halloween or werewolves, and this kind of does all of them in this really fun send up to horror movies in and of themselves with a cast that this movie was on the shelf for quite some time, right, Pete?
Yeah, a couple of years, so it was on the shelf.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Avengers was coming out, and like, hey,
yeah.
all of a sudden, we have a star in this movie. He wasn't a star when we made it, but he's a star now.
Yeah, Chris Hemsworth, and this was produced by Whedon. Did he write it too?
He co-wrote it. He co-wrote it with Drew Goddard. Yeah.
Yeah, and Goddard directed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just remember being in the theater and seeing the Mutant Enemy thing that I'd only seen on TV.
Yeah.
Pop up or that kind of thing. But yeah, no, Cabin in the Woods, just this real fun send up that I remember seeing the trailers and not expecting anything. Like I didn't know what to expect. I thought, oh, this will just be like a sci-fi Evil Dead kind of vibe, and it's so much more than that. I mean, Bradley Whitford and
Jenkins.
He always was Jenkins. Just as the scientist characters, they, you know, just plays with your expectations as soon as they hit the screen, and you'll never look at Merman the same after seeing Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, I love just how much it just goes full into. I mean, it's really funny and all that. It's playing a lot on the tropes, but I love how the third act just goes for everything. It doesn't pull back at all. It doesn't pull any punches. It just gives you everything you want, and it is absolutely delightful in every sense of the word.
Yes, it is.
I left the theater after seeing this feeling like why can't most movies satisfy me this way? Why does some of them have to be so stingy with the ideas? Like, it's just, I don't know.
And I still felt that it always lent itself to sequels and stuff, but it's kind of nice that there hasn't been any, because throughout the movie you see how different cultures deal with the same whatever we're dealing with in the movie, and that makes me laugh as a film fan. Just seeing the Japanese, how they deal with this type of situation. But yeah, it's been some time since I've seen it, but I do enjoy it. I lent out my Blu-ray to somebody. I forgot who I lent it to, and now it's just gone. So when I get the hankering to watch it, I remember, and I should probably track that back down.
My number 12 is Toy Story 3. This is another one where, you know, I had an experience at the cinema where I was at like an age where I think I was on holiday with the family. I didn't really want to be on the holiday with the family. I was at that sort of age, and I've got like you know, younger siblings, so we were at like a Butlins or something stupid. I was like, I don't want to be here, you know. And the place had a cinema, so I was just like, right, I'm off. I'm just gonna go sit in the cinema all day. And first thing on was Toy Story 3, and I thought, yeah, why not? And it was fantastic. It's such a fantastic end to that trilogy, in a way that I probably didn't see coming beforehand. I didn't, you know, the Toy Story. Yeah, I love the first one. I love the second one even more than the first one, actually. But yeah, they've never been incredibly deep movies, even though they have got that messaging. But this one has just extra layers to it, because it is about that, you know, that growing up and kind of moving on. And the ending is fantastic. But you've got, you know, all the stuff in the conveyor belt. That's the word I'm looking for. Oh man, so good.
I think there's a serious argument for this being the best of the three, and I say that having not seen the fourth, so I have no opinion on that. But
I weirdly will always say 2 is my favorite, but this might be the best, if that makes sense.
So my number 12, that would be something you probably don't get a lot, and that is The Invitation, which from the director of Jennifer's Body. The Invitation, just a phenomenal horror movie that, again, yeah, it's one you don't really want to talk too much about, because there are definitely like some twists and turns, maybe some stuff that kind of goes where you don't really expect it to. But, you know, essentially it's about this guy going, this guy and his girlfriend go to, they get an invitation from his ex-wife.
The titular invitation.
The titular invitation to go to his house, and you're not really sure why. And then, like, as stuff kind of starts to unravel, and it's like there's this really, it's kind of funny the way they play with, like, as the audience, something's up, but at the same time, you're not sure exactly what. It's like something's off here, but I don't know what. And as it slowly gets revealed, it's just, like great storytelling, great performances, and just, like a lot of paranoia and like unease. And it's like, as we're kind of getting later on the list, you might see that maybe like more horror movies popping up, because that's what we do the horror movie show, and like, we both watch a lot of horror movies. So some of these bigger ones like really stand out and are just like so well done. It's insane. But I love anything that can kind of really give you that feeling of just like unease and like just knowing something is off or wrong and not being able to put your finger at it.
Number 12. Number 12 is Gone Girl.
Ooh.
Another thriller. Another one that really sticks with you after you watch it too.
Rosamund Pike is absolutely freaking phenomenal in this movie.
So good. And I don't really like her in anything else, but in this movie, this movie was made for her. She is probably the best performance on my list.
I don't know, this is a weird thing, is I don't think I knew who she was before The World's End.
She was a Bond girl. That's the only thing I knew her from. And she was the female lead in Jack Reacher, which is not good. I know a lot of dads like it. I don't like it.
I never saw it.
I don't know why. I think she's an okay actress, except in this movie, I think she's so exceptional and does crazy so well. And it's such it's is it Fincher that does the movie?
Mm-hmm. David Fincher.
He's got that Fincher vomit filter over when he's filming everything, but it's kind of gross. But you can't take your eyes off it.
This is great. A movie that if you're in a relationship and your relationship's in a sort of rocky place, don't watch this movie together because it will probably end it. It's not a healthy one. But I love how dark and sinister it gets, and the twists and turns are really fun. And I'll just say it's got one of the best villains of the decade, probably.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they're all kind of shitty people.
They are.
I guess they're all villains.
I don't know. Ben Affleck's sister's quite nice. What's her face from Leftovers? Carrie Coon. She's quite nice in this.
That's her, isn't it? Okay.
She seems like a decent person.
Yeah, you're right.
My number 12 is a little sci-fi gem that I try to make everyone watch, and that is Coherence. It is a movie where it's just people in a house. It's a dinner party, but it has the sci-fi concept that as a comet passes by overhead, something happens, and all these alternate realities essentially are kind of connected for one night, and it's about the people at the dinner party kind of beginning to suspect that there's duplicates of themselves somewhere else. And I'm not going to say anything else because I don't really even say that much. I'm just giving you that much just to pique your interest a little bit. But this is a movie that I highly recommend going in knowing as little as humanly possible. And it does star Nicholas Brendon, who was on the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. However, it even uses that to an effect at one point. I won't spoil it.
Does it really?
It does. It
no
does.
wonder you bloody love it.
And it ties it into its theme. It's great. But it's a movie about ideas, and it's a movie about the thought process of what's going on, and the characters try to figure it out. And it keeps piling upon itself, but you keep realizing extra layers to what's happening. It's such a beautiful little movie because it's just sometimes I want the big effects, I want people in space, and I want all these things. But sometimes even more impressive to me is just the idea. So some of my favorite episodes of Star Trek come from just debating a moral or a science fiction idea. And this movie is about, what if this was happening? How do we process it? And that's what the movie is.
I think the strength in that, you described that, it comes in making you believe in the idea without you having to see everything. When something looks great, it can be great. You can see it all there though. As long as the effects are good enough, you believe it. Whereas with something like this, you have to your dialogue in particular has to be so spectacular that you have to convince me that this is real. You have to make me believe in this without showing me anything.
And it's arguably more impressive because of that, because it is purely on the writing and the performances and the directing to really make it sing. So no, I highly recommend Coherence. Sometimes people know I love a bottle story, but some even more than that, I am so impressed when it's a bottle story where all it is really people talking in a room or a house or whatever. 12 Angry Men being the classic example of just no, here's 12 people in a room, and that's your movie, and it is riveting stuff. And I think this is an inventive little gem of a science fiction film that I highly recommend to everyone. So check out Coherence.
All right, so number 11 is an animated movie. Came out last year, and it is Edge of the Spider-Verse.
Damn it!
Yeah, number 11. So you're 10 off, Pete. But how this movie? This and Homecoming both made me realize I quite like Spider-Man. And this is also the movie that made me go buy a PlayStation 4 so I could play this PlayStation Spider-Man game. But just you get the Miles origin, and it's handled fantastically. The animation style, I guess the production company patented it. So anything that we see from them going forward comes directly from this. And I think that's really smart because up until Pixar, animation's kind of been stagnant. And so it was nice to see this kind of two-dimensional yet three-dimensional hypermotion style, almost like a comic book brought to life. And then you get to the different spider characters.
Yeah, and it played with the frame rates as well. Like I think the Miles himself is in a slower frame rate than everything else until the end of the movie when he becomes fully confident and fledged.
And that's quite smart. I didn't know that. That's really cool.
So it's an interesting little thing.
But yeah, Peter B. Parker, just one of my all-time favorite characters. Kind of the loser version of Spider-Man, who has mentors Miles, and then you get Spider-Gwen, you get Spider-Ham, you have Nick Cage as Spider-Man Noir, which this was a year where he played both Superman in the Teen Titans movie and then Spider-Man in Spider-Verse. You got the anime, what's her name, Penny Parker, thrown in there, and each of the animation styles are different. Like Miles and Gwen and Peter B. Parker are all very similar, but the other ones, Spider-Ham's very cartoony. Penny Parker's very anime, manga, even in her animation. And then Spider-Man Noir is straight up noir. Like, he's darker than the rest of them. And it's just, it's really an achievement in animation. And it deserves much more praise. And it already has a lot.
Yeah. You get no arguments for me for Spider-Verse. Spider-Verse, from the very first trailer, it looked like it was going to be something special.
And that soundtrack is full of bangers. It's one of the rare movie soundtracks that as soon as that movie was over, I went and downloaded. But yeah, no, Miles made me appreciate Miles in a way that I hadn't, because I hadn't read his books. And, just because I wasn't a big Spider-Man fan, so I rectified that since. I've read a couple, and he's a great character. And fitting of the Spider-Man mantle.
My number 11 is Dark Knight Rises. I know Pete spoke a lot about it earlier about what it means to to be Batman. It's kind of the core premise of the movie, and all that stuff is fantastic.
I'm a little surprised it's higher on your list than mine.
Yeah,
because I legitimately think I like this movie more, which to me says that my top 50 is just better than yours because this movie's lower on my list.
That's not necessarily true. I mean, you probably do like this movie more, but you've got movies on yours that I outright despise, right? So, it balances out. I'm not saying yours is better or worse, but it's worse. But whatever.
So I like this movie more than you do, but I have, what did I have this at? Let me check.
Like
19. So I have 18 movies I think are better than Dark Knight Rises on this list, and I like Dark Knight Rises more, which means my top 18 is scientifically means more to me than your top 10 does to you.
No, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I am actually a little surprised you didn't have it higher.
I restrained myself, all right? I restrained myself and said, no, I'm going to look at this from multiple aspects. And
Okay. Sure.
But anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic movie. To get down to it. As much as I say, maybe I don't like it quite as much as Pete. I still gave it a pretty damn high score last time I saw it. It's still a fantastic movie. It has all the great moments that I'm with you, Peter, of having to defend it, like the lighting up the bat, and people think it's stupid. It's like no, that's the point.
I love that scene. That might be one of my favorite scenes in the whole trilogy. Shut up, all of you.
I know, and we're both on that side there, and people are stupid, right? There are things that are maybe not perfect in this movie, like the treatment of Bane towards the end of the movie, for example. But overall, it's the point of the movie, and the way it does pull off its core message while having all this other fun stuff going on. Like you say, like Catwoman, like some sort of Robin character, kind of for the first time in this trilogy. All that stuff's great.
So my number 11, that would be Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This was like a very surprising franchise because I love animal movies, and like Planet of the Apes, not really like you wouldn't say like not like animals, but like I love like like chimps and apes and stuff, and I'm quite fond of the original movies. I think the first one is just really good, and then and they get a little bit cheesier in there, but I think there's still stuff to love. But then after the Tim Burton reboot, I don't think anyone really had too much drive or love to want to see another remake or attempt at it. And then when Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I think a lot of people were kind of like, huh, hey, this is like actually not that bad. Like, I think at least with me and like people I talked to, it was kind of surprising. Like, yeah, this is actually like a really decent movie. So it's it's pretty fun and surprising. But then I feel like Dawn just kind of blew it out of the water. Like, man, just such a cool like way to take that series. And I love how there's like long stretches where there's even dialogues, just like the apes talking and signing with each other. And I love anything where like the humans are the assholes and they're the bad guys, and the the CGI was like so well done. And
otherworldly. The CG in those apes movies is like photoreal almost all the time. It's fantastic.
That's why you almost feel spoiled like when you watch other stuff and it's like, why does this not look as good as the apes in here?
So I have another documentary for number 11. It is one that stuck with me for a long time. It is Going Clear, Scientology and the Prison of Belief. This is the HBO documentary.
I did not see this coming.
Oh my God, it is so good. And it will, like, I'm a Tom Cruise super fan, but I know he's a monster. Like, I know he might be like the devil, or let's see, he's a wolf in sheep's clothing for sure.
Sure.
Very fit little sheep that likes to run. He is, but it is not just a documentary. It is a horror movie, and it's all real. Like, this is one that I've watched many, many times to remind myself of just what is going on in like my neighborhood. I live in the area, the mecca of Scientology. Definitely watch it if you haven't seen it. It's on HBO. Going Clear. I think Tom Cruise hasn't been back to the Oscars because it was nominated for Best Documentary. If it might have even won that year, and he's been boycotting the Oscars.
My number 11 is Kick-Ass. Again, I talk about surprises, and I think it's notable that a lot of like some of my higher ups are surprises. I have a lot of surprises for me in this top 50, and I think it's because when a movie does surprise you. You legitimately don't know you're in for something great. This is the movie that introduced me to Matthew Vaughn, who I'd say is probably one of my favourite current working directors, especially for sort of more mainstream action-y stuff. Kick-Ass is a movie that should not work. Kick-Ass is a movie that from the trailers I thought would be obnoxious Mark Miller shite, because Mark Miller is a comic book writer I do not like. But somehow Matthew Vaughn, and co-writing with Jane Goldman, somehow take his concepts, and they've done that more than once because they've done it with Kingsman as well after this.
Yeah.
But they take the concept and they gave it so much heart that despite the fact that we have these kind of edgy teenage characters who are spouting all these swear words, and it's kind of juvenile humor almost, but it kind of works in the context of its like hyper real, world. It gave me a movie with some of the best directed action, because Matthew Vaughn's excellent action sequences. It gave me a weird concoction of a score that's actually made up of scores from other movies, but with some new material kind of like filtered in like throughout as well.
Pretty unique.
Yeah. It gave me, obviously like a good Nicolas Cage role, which doesn't happen as often as I'd like. But it gave me this heart, this story about trying to do the right thing, and this father-daughter story, and there's so much heart in this movie by the time you get to the end that you're just so ready for Mark Strong, the villain, to go down, who's also great in the movie, might I add. Like, this to me is like the king of, like, I talked about how sometimes like I love well-crafted pulp, and there's a difference between something like this, or I mentioned earlier on with Django Unchained, or something like, I don't know, what else have I mentioned on this list, versus your Michael Bay movies, or your weaker superhero movies, where like I'm just so like impressed with just how well all of it comes together and clicks together. Good side characters, funny side characters, plot beats and action beats that are just riveting to watch. And I saw this like 3 times in the theater because I left going, why was that so? It's called Kick-Ass. I should hate a movie called Kick-Ass, but for some reason it's really good. And then to prove the point here of like how much it matters to have the right people behind it, Kick-Ass 2 was everything I feared Kick-Ass 1 was going to be, and was terrible. So
yep, it's complete garbage, that second one.
Yep, it did so many things that I hated, and but Kick-Ass, the first Kick-Ass, is such a standalone gem that does not need to have anything attached to it. It is genuinely kind of a feel-good little superhero action story. And that'll bring an end to this episode, but we are starting the top 10 next time, so be excited for that. Let us know what you think of this episode's picks in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at Mild_Fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the show, you can, of course, go to patreon.com/MildFuzzTV and support us for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles. So go have a look and see if you're interested. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, guys. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.